So Amanda LaMott is up next. She has the local agency maintenance and preservation. She's also very active in our TSP2 local agency working group. Please join me in welcoming Amanda.
Well, I went to this conference first in Reno and came back to Idaho and just was really on fire with all of the ideas and information that we could help share with Idaho locals. And really that first exposure to this group a couple years ago is what brought this workshop that we put together in Idaho for local agencies this year, and that's what I'm going to be speaking about today. So first of all, what is LTAC? Raise of hands, how many of you are familiar with your LTAP within your state? Every state has an LTAP. Idaho's is a little bit different. We were created in 1994 by the Idaho legislature. We serve 287 local jurisdictions, so that's cities, counties, and highway districts across the state. And we're governed by a council, and those are made up of elected officials within each of those groups. We also report to the Idaho legislature, to the House and Senate transportation committees each year. And if the political change were to ever occur, we'd most likely be absorbed by the Idaho Transportation Department as part of a local roads group. I believe most states have a division within their agency that handles local projects. Most of what we do can be summarized in these three things. We do a lot of training through our T2 program across the state. We administer federal funds through programs like rural, urban, bridge, off-system, and bridge local. And then one of our primary focuses is on technical assistance. How can we get information to the locals, whether that's geotech, survey, private property? We get calls every day from any of those 287 jurisdictions with questions on how to find a subject matter expert or help them find information in code, and that's really our main goal. One of the big pushes we've had lately in Idaho is on bridges. We have a lot of bridges on our local network that is all administered and maintained by our local agencies. To compare that to our ITD state system, we have about 2,400 bridges that are over 20 feet on the local system compared to 1,300 feet on the state system, which is about 64%. We also look at bridges that are between 10 and 20 feet. Those are not inspected by ITD as in our agreement, like our 20-foot and over bridges, but just something to be aware of because that is such a large number. There's a lot of structures that are being maintained by local agencies across the state. When it comes to funding, we have about $9 million a year in the state, and right off the top, $1.9 million of it goes to ITD to fund bridge inspection. So that leaves us with $7 million to fund bridge replacements, and as you all know, the cost of replacement has been going up, and also many of our bridges across the state, as they've been aging and they're 40, 50, 60 years old, they're more than $7 million just for one bridge. Our last bridge application, our top two highest scoring applications were $12 million and $14 million for just one bridge. So those agencies have no way of funding that with their own money, let alone having federal funds to cover that amount. And just sometimes the 7% match is a big lift for our local agencies. So with the new IIJA bill, that has funding for 100% federal is a big deal for a lot of our more rural areas that have no way of funding bridge replacements outside of that. And I guess the big part of why we're here today is none of that money is for bridge preservation or bridge maintenance. We have such a big need for replacements. All of our federal aid that comes to the state for local agencies goes toward bridge replacements, which leaves a big hole, and that's what we're trying to help with at LTAC. So some of our stats, of the 2,400 locally owned bridges, the average age is 45 years. I listened to the Maryland guy. It sounds like it's similar in probably all of your states, and Maryland too. We're pushing that 50-year design life that most of these bridges were designed with. And by far, most of those bridges are in fair condition. And those are bridges that are ripe for some maintenance and preservation activities to try to keep those bridges in fair from dipping into poor condition and maybe even put some of those up into the good category. So that's why we're trying to highlight those. And in comparing that to the state bridges, pretty similar across the state. We do have a number of poor bridges, those 154 in poor condition, and then additional 356 that are posted. Luckily, in Idaho, we have a legislature and a governor that's very pro-transportation funding. And with a landmark bill this year, we were awarded $200 million over the next 3 years to replace poor and posted bridges within Idaho. So the goal of that is to take 1/3 of those bridges that are poor and posted and get those into fair or good category. So that's a huge step with local funding. So that, that's outside of the federal funds. But in the meantime, what can we do to help keep the fair bridges in fair condition for as long as possible? So in 2019, we applied for a grant through FHWA, and we were awarded a $100,000 stick grant. And the goal of that grant was to put on a 2-day demonstration workshop focusing on bridge maintenance and preservation, low-hanging fruit, stuff that local agencies can do with their own forces, and very easy to administer, not a lot of technical requirements. What we could use that money for was to pay for travel, and that was probably 75% of the funding. Idaho, like many of your states, is very diverse geographically, and a lot of our people had to come 8 or 9 hour drive away just to get to Boise. So 75% of it was for travel, and then the rest we could spend on materials if we needed to pay for materials for our demonstrations. Some of the goals of our workshop was to provide a free training. So we really emphasized that. Any agency that wanted to come, their travel was paid for, per diem was paid for, all the costs of the workshop was completely free to that agency. We wanted to highlight low-cost bridge solutions, so things that they could self-perform or do for very low cost to make sure that we're trying to keep the bridges that they're maintaining in good condition. And then another goal we had in talking with Travis and what Oregon has done is trying to get a blend of speakers, not just engineers talking to all these foremen. We wanted to get foremen talking about what's working in their agency and agencies. We did have some engineering consultants offer their time, and as well as some agency staff. So we tried to keep the presentations to 45 minutes and then different speakers to keep it engaging and interesting and really speaking to the audience, because I believe of the 60 or 70 people we had, we might have had less than 10 engineers. So these were really on the ground folks that were foremen, roadway supervisors, plowing snow in the winter, the people that really need the information, but we really wanted to keep the information on their level and not technical. And finally, just our goal was to have them walk away with some more confidence that they can do some of this work themselves and not rely on someone else, or just understand that they can do a lot of work for a very little amount of money. We were able to get over 60 people from across the state, and we had people all the way from the Panhandle come to eastern Idaho, and really good cross-reference across the state. So some of our challenges, travel, it's hard, especially in the summer, to get some of those folks away from their daily tasks. In Idaho, some of our regions have a very short season where they can do a lot of their maintenance and paving, so that was one challenge. Another challenge was we had a huge breadth of knowledge base. So some people didn't know the basics, like terminology, what's a deck, what's substructure, what's superstructure, all the way to some county engineers. So how do we balance the needs of all the people coming to this workshop? And finally, COVID-19. Poor Ed gave us the grant in 2019 with the goal of doing the workshop in 2020, and we really needed this to be in person. I don't know about you, but watching a Zoom training is not the most fun, especially if you're not an engineer and you're not a desk person. That was not really how we wanted to get the information across. So we were able to delay it until 2022 this summer when we could safely do it in person. So our workshop format was day 1 in Boise. We had all day of presentations, and day 2 was 4 site visits at different bridges in Ada and Canyon County, where we were showing on the ground and encouraging our locals to participate in some of the activities on day 2. So our goals of day 1, understanding bridge terminology, started off with the basics. We wanted them to have a comfortable idea of when they should self-perform work and when they should call their engineer. That's sort of a fine line sometimes. People feel like, oh, I know what I'm doing, and we want to encourage that, but then also help them understand that there are times when they should call an engineer and have some calcs done. Some visibility for local agencies who are doing a great job. We have a couple counties who are going out there every year and with their own forces doing GRS IBS abutments and building timber decks or installing prefabricated structures. And we wanted to give them a chance to highlight what they've been doing successfully and show that it can be done in some of our other counties across the state. And finally, awareness of environmental permitting. We had our environmental gal come from LHTAC, and she just gave a really great overview with a 1-page, these are the different agencies you might work with, these are the triggers for these different types of permits. And I think her card was taken more than anyone else in the whole workshop because, that's always changing and it's hard to keep track of all that. So some of the topics we included on day one were bridge basics, ITD bridge asset management. Because ITD does all of our bridge inspections, they're the ones that send out inspection reports to these local agencies. So we wanted Dan and Jake to come and get faces with the names so that when an agency gets a call, hey, your bridge is going to be posted or your bridge needs to get closed, then they will have had a chance to have that face-to-face time with the ITD people that will be sending that information. We talked about the really easy stuff, bridge maintenance, washing, pothole repairs, patching. We had a foreman from ITD District 1 come down and talk about the ITD method of how they manage their inventory and prioritize their needs in bridges and roads in District 1. Camas County talked about timber bridge maintenance and what they do and how they prioritize their list of needs and have been tackling it across multiple years. And rounded out the morning with bridge maintenance, joints and patching. In the afternoon, we had ITD come and give us a talk on bridge scour. And then in the afternoon, we had a few consultants donate some time and spoke about silanes on decks, hand mixing and EPC overlay, again, our environmental permitting talk, when to call an engineer. This was a really great one where they had pictures, and by raise of hands, would you do work on this yourself or would you call your engineer? And that was a good interactive one that I think gave people some understanding of, what their comfort should be with their own fixes. And then we rounded out with, okay, now that you have all this information, how do you go about managing your inventory? What do you have? Do you know what you have and do you know what condition it's in? And then once you do, where's the funding coming from? And so that was our goal for day one, it was really an information overload. We put a lot of this, all of the presentations were on our website so that people could go back and check on it later since it was such an insane amount of information that was handed out. So day two, and this is why we really wanted it to be in person, is we had selected 4 bridges within Ada and Canyon County that we did the demos on. So Collins engineers helped walk the group through some mock bridge inspections. We had split the group, there were 60 or 70 people, and so we had 2 buses of people rotating through all these different bridges. So a group would go through mock bridge inspection, we did concrete deck spalls and patching. Then in the afternoon, we had some silane deck waterproofing treatments, as well as a concrete overlay. And the consultants, I believe all 4 of them are here and have booths at their outside in the room next door. So just want to say big thanks to these guys. And I got to say, when I reached out to this group in 2020 or 21 to ask for help, and is anyone willing to come to Idaho to help with this workshop, I can't tell you how many emails I got within 10 minutes. I think it was 20 emails from this group. So this is an amazing resource, especially focusing on local agencies. It was very easy for me to get these suppliers, Collins, Advanced Chemical, eChem, and QuickBond were amazing to work with, and came to Idaho to do these demos for our local agencies. Some of the challenges that I didn't think about when selecting the bridges was we needed the bridge to have a full closure. Because we were gonna have 30 people on the bridge, we wanted to make sure that we could close the bridge off to traffic to keep it safe for our workshop participants, which more or less took Ada County out of the picture. That's where we're now. So we were mostly looking at Canyon County for our bridges. Permitting was an issue, like getting people to understand, that we're not a contractor and we can't give you bonding and insurance to spray a deck treatment on this bridge that's gonna take 15 minutes to dry and we'll be gone. Finding bridges that were the right age and the right condition to accept the treatments that we wanted to apply. We also wanted them to be close together so that people weren't spending all day on the bus, driving an hour or 2 in between bridges. And finally, the one that was the most surprising to me was finding concrete decks that were bare. Almost everyone in the rural parts of the state immediately pave over their concrete decks with asphalt. And it helps reduce their ongoing maintenance because they know asphalt, they work with asphalt all the time, they're good at potholing or fixing potholes. They don't have a lot of confidence in bare decks. So that was a surprising challenge in finding bridges that were in good condition that had a concrete deck that we could apply some treatments to. So some pictures from our event. This is the pictures from Collins engineers on our mock inspection. So we kind of walked through the inspection report, the different lines and where the information's coming from. Thank you to Collins engineers. Both of you who are on our workshop are here today in the audience. So that was our first stop in Nampa. Next, we did a silane waterproofing treatment. This was advanced chemical, so thanks to Tim for bringing the equipment and the product to apply. And I think this was a really surprisingly easy and low cost, easy to apply product that I heard a lot of chatter about throughout the day, and maybe a takeaway, especially because the equipment itself is, I don't know, Tim, like $10,000 or less? $2,500. So really cheap to buy the equipment, really inexpensive to buy the product. And if you're doing anything, maybe waterproofing your deck is a great place to start. EChem did a more robust treatment in the afternoon. We had picked a bridge in Caldwell and we applied an epoxy overlay. They had come in the day before and did the first lane so that all the participants could see what it looked like when it was cured. And then we did the second lane with our workshop participants. That's me in the top right corner. I did get to help with that, so I'll drive my kids by that later. But so we really encouraged the folks that were at the workshop to get involved and help apply the treatments and get their hands dirty. And with the group that we had, that was not an easy ask. I think once we broke the ice, everyone was willing to jump in. And then we finished the day with deck chain drag and deck patching. So Quick Bond helped us listen to see what that sounds like. And again, that's a very easy, having the chain is a very cheap, inexpensive thing you can keep in your truck. And especially with our local forces, that's really easy to, once you hear what it sounds like with their spalling and get some experience, then that's a really easy fix as well. So some of our key takeaways from the workshop was networking is just as important as all the information we presented. I think having people with the subject matter expertise, seeing other agencies that have the same budget and the same experience doing some pretty exciting things for their bridges was helpful. And just so important to have the combination of in-classroom and the in-the-field demonstrations. Finally, since travel was our biggest hurdle and the most expensive part of the workshop, we're looking at hosting smaller one-day workshops in the different parts of the state. So we'll go up to North Idaho, and we'd love to have partners from any of you in the room to focus on any treatment or product that you have. We're happy to help facilitate some training and get that going. So we'll be doing that more ongoing without further stick grants in the future. What questions are there?
Just kind of curious, I'm in California, we have 635 local agencies, so always trying to get interaction and outreach and I guess champions, maybe the right term, for local agencies. Have you guys found that you're starting to get that? Did you get a lot of synergy from this group, or any keys to success in doing that? Would love to hear.
I think a lot of it was LTAC and our structure itself, because we do administer all of the programs and all of our local agencies across the state are familiar with us. I think that helped us having a solid foundation. We also do workshops across the state in October where we travel to 13 different locations across the state and give a 3-hour workshop specifically for local agencies, and we talk about upcoming applications that we have for funding, the new IIJA bill. We explain what's coming out, especially since there's direct recipients. A lot of our agencies can now be direct recipients as part of the new program. So I think we were able to take advantage of the October workshops to let people know that this was coming. And then it was free. If it's free, we have a lot better participation rate than if it's $50 or $100, because probably like in California, some of your agencies operate with a $100,000 budget annually, and that has to cover everything. So if it's free, I think that was our biggest key, was to make sure that that was taken care of. And then just getting the word out through our newsletter and through our workshops where we went in person across the state, getting the word out was really important.
I do have a question. What brought you to your first Western Bridge Preservation Partnership meeting?
I honestly don't know. That's a stumper. I don't know. I think it was probably one of your emails. Just happened across, and maybe you.
That was not a baited question there. I did not. I was trying to remember myself.
Thank you.
The preceding was produced by the National Center for Pavement Preservation. More information can be found on the web at pavementpreservation.org. Additional support provided by Michigan State University.